Hello students. This week we're going to be talking about actually two different skills that are kind of similar, so I'm grouping them together. And that is evidence and research. Specifically, we're going to be looking at what should I know about evidence and research? How do I research a topic? How do I find and use the best evidence? And how do I answer test questions about evidence? To start things off, what should I know about evidence and what should I also know about research? So we're going to look at both of these and kind of see what we need to know. First of all, evidence refers to quotes or paraphrased sections of a passage that are used to prove some sort of statement. It's good to note that not all evidence is good evidence though. So just because you have a quote doesn't mean it's a good quote, doesn't mean it fully proves what you're trying to prove or anything like that. So to actually be a good piece of evidence, you actually have to have a few things. So for evidence to be considered good, it must be from a credible source or whatever. Sometimes that source is already given to you, so it's easy in that case. But if not, if you have to research, make sure it's from a credible source. It also has to prove that the statement is true or false if you're trying to prove that it's false, and reflect what the source is saying overall. So sometimes you might find a quote that does prove something, but if it is taken out of context, if that's not what the text is really saying, you just kind of bent a quote to what you want it to say, then that is not a good thing to do either. So just make sure that you are following those three steps there to make sure you have good evidence. Moving on to research. Research refers to looking up credible sources online to find information to prove a statement. So credible basically means that you're not going to be looking at things like blog posts or Wikipedia or anything. You're going to be looking at sources from authors that should know what they're saying. So kind of experts in the field is what you'll be looking for if you're asked to research about a topic. So moving along with research, how do you actually research a topic if you're asked to do so? So there's a few steps you can take to research a topic, so just keep these in mind. First of all, you want to look up your topic online to find more information about it. So you can do a Google search or something like that. You can also research in books and whatnot, but I assume most of you will probably be using the internet. So if that's the case, you can just do some Google searches and whatnot to research your topic. You're going to specifically be trying to find sources that are written by experts in the topic that you are researching. So again, that next statement there, avoid sources that aren't credible, so don't pick any sources that are like a blog post or Wikipedia or something. Make sure that they are written by somebody who knows what they're talking about, or at least they should. And if needed, so if in some assignment or something you're asked to find quotes, or you're needing to maybe in an essay or something like that, have something to actually pull from the sources, make sure that you do find some quotes in that source that will help you prove something about your topic. So again, another little warning there, make sure you're not quoting out of context, make sure that you are fully expressing what the source is actually meaning, so don't just look up a random quote, but make sure that you're looking at a quote that expresses what the author is actually meaning to prove whatever statement you're trying to prove. And then lastly, after you do that and you have your sources and you found some quotes that you might use, then just make sure that you cite the source that you use by including the URL or some author name and title of the source. That's how you go about researching. Moving on to evidence now, how do you find and use the best evidence? So if you're asked to use evidence and looking in some sort of passage, or maybe you have to write an essay or something that requires evidence, how do you actually find and use the best evidence? First of all, you want to know exactly what you're looking for. So is the question or the prompt or whatever is asking about the main idea of the text, or maybe what a certain section is talking about? Is it asking what the author's logical reasoning is, to where you have to look at kind of their logic, their reasoning? Is it asking about author's persuasive techniques? Are you looking for examples of that in the text? You just want to kind of identify what exactly you're looking for, so you can look specifically in the text for that, because that will help you. Then you want to think of what the author is really saying or doing overall. So what is his or her purpose in this text. What are they really trying to accomplish? What does he or she support? You want to kind of know these kind of things going into it, kind of make sure you understand that, so that when you're looking for quotes, that you are looking for something that truly captures what the author is actually saying and what they are actually doing, so that your quote is accurately reflecting that. And then finally, you are actually finding the quote that does prove what the author is saying and doing. And that's how you would actually find and use the best evidence if it's asking you for any sort of quotes or to use evidence. And finally, lastly, with evidence, how do you answer test questions about evidence? This one's a tricky one. Evidence actually is pretty much involved in every test answer if you think about it, because you're always picking what is the right answer from the text. So really you should always be thinking about evidence for whatever test question it's saying. But basically there's specific test questions that are actually about quotes, or maybe the answer is a quote that you're picking. So that's what we're talking about specifically here, but just know that evidence is always important when you're thinking about test questions. Let's go through these steps of what you can do about those questions that are asking about a quote specifically. So first of all, you want to know exactly what the question is asking. So of course you want to look out for words like not, or both, or neither, or except, and things like that. And you also want to look if it is asking about something or somewhere specific, or if it is in general. As I've mentioned before as well, if it's asking for something really generic, it's probably more likely that it might be an all of the above kind of situation. Not saying it is, but it's more likely, so just be aware of that. And those are just kind of things you want to pay attention to with the specifically what the question is asking and how it's phrased. So definitely pay attention to the wording there. Then you want to think about what is most true and present in the text, or the section of the text that's asking about. So you want to just think about overall, what is the text really saying, and then kind of think about that while you go on to our next steps. So then you want to see what each quote is really saying. So obviously it's going to be asking you maybe, what does this quote really prove this statement, or maybe what does this, what statement does this quote really mean, whatever the question is really asking you. So you want to look at the quote or quotes and see what exactly is it really saying. Is it fully answering the question, everything like that. And of course you want to pick the best answer that is fully answering the question and everything like that. And specifically you want to, again, watch out for answers that are partially correct or worded in a tricky way. A lot of times you might have quotes that maybe partially prove something, but they don't prove the whole statement. So definitely watch out for that, and you also want to make sure that the wording of the question or the answers is not fooling you. So maybe there's a word or something in there that could fool you, so just pay attention for that to make sure you are truly picking the best answer. And that's it. That's how you would answer test questions. So just keep those in mind, and you should do well with it. Finally, for today, we're going to go ahead and put our evidence skills to the test with this example test question. So we're going to look at this test question, go through those steps we just talked about, and see if we can figure out the right answer. So which quotes from Lincoln's second inaugural address best shows the issue that caused the Civil War? So first of all, we want to see what exactly the question is saying, and it is asking for specifically what issue caused the Civil War. So that phrasing there, we want to pay attention to that. We're looking for an issue that caused the Civil War. So let's look at our answers then and see which one we think best matches what that text is really about. We can think about from the text overall. He talks about, in the second inaugural address, he talks about a few things. He talks about slavery. He talks about kind of the divisiveness between the North and the South, and kind of how that instigated the war and whatnot. He also talks a bit about how God might have maybe used the war as a form of justice. So that's kind of what the text is saying overall. So let's go ahead and jump into these questions and see what we think the issue is that caused the Civil War based on these quotes. Which one best answers it? So A, both parties depreciated war, but one of them would make war rather than let the nation survive, and the other would accept war rather than let it perish, and the war came. This is a tricky one because it is saying basically what instigated the war. The main thing to note is that there's a tricky wording here. It's not actually mentioning the issue specifically that caused the war. It's just saying that they did instigate the war and it came. So A is actually not going to be a good answer because it's not specifically talking about what issue caused it. And now let's go on to B then. 1/8 of the whole population were colored slaves, not distributed generally over the Union, but localized in the southern part of it. Lincoln did express that slavery was the main issue of the Civil War, so we would think B is a pretty good answer. However, it doesn't actually say that in B. If you just look at the quote, nowhere in B does it say that it's the cause of the Civil War. So that is why, again, just it's missing part of it. So B is actually not a good answer either. But then we get on to C. These slaves constituted a peculiar and powerful interest. All knew that this interest was somehow the cause of the war. So this one is fully answering the question there, that is showing the issue being slavery. And it also shows, actually very obviously, saying the cause of the war. So C will be our right answer. But again, we do have D as well, all of the above. The reason that's not all of the above is because we saw, again, A doesn't really show completely the issue that caused the Civil War, even though it shows that the Civil War started. And B doesn't really show, even though it shows the issue, it doesn't show that it caused the Civil War. So that is why D would not be the right answer either. So just kind of pay attention to all those things, but that is how you would answer test questions about evidence. Hopefully this was helpful, and I will see you next time.